This is a compilation of problems with Yandere Simulator, covering everything from the game's lore to its characters. If you want me to make more videos criticizing Yandere Simulator, then make sure to hit the subscribe button. Anyway, with that being said, let's get into it. One of the more common complaints about the lore of Yandere Simulator has to do with the Aishi Curse. In general, fans of Yandere Simulator have criticized the Aishi Curse as being exaggerated and unnecessary to the game's overall story. For example, Reddit user Machias08 stated, "I actually like it when games have extensive lore past the surface level, but Yandere Simulator's lore is an example of how not to do it. For one example, the Aishi family suffering a generational curse. It really just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's not helped by the fact that there is zero explanation for this curse even existing in the first place. Did it just happen out of nowhere? Did one of Ayano's ancestors perform a ritual that went wrong, and that's how the bloodline got cursed? When you actually think about it, there are a couple of plot holes relating to the Aishi curse. As Machias08 said, it's never explained where the Aishi curse even came from. We do know when the first Aishi got the curse, but it hasn't been explained how she got it. Another criticism of the Aishi curse is how it adds, quote, unnecessary lore to Ayano's character. To this end, Reddit user FR Street wrote, the supernatural stuff, even down to the Aishi family curse. Too much explanation for a basic concept idea. Just let her be a yandere and let the world breathe a little without stuffing it full of random lore no one asked for. One could argue that Ayano does not need the Aishi curse existing to explain why she is the way she is. After all, the basic premise of Yandere Simulator is a schoolgirl killing people to get with the person she desires. Lore is not really needed to make this idea work. Users have proposed solutions to this problem, however. Reddit user Chilling Somber wrote, I think the Aishi curse could work. Instead of actually making it an actual curse, just turn it into a self-fulfilling prophecy. Due to the curse being so ingrained in the Aishi bloodline, they fooled themselves into following their supposed fate. Sure, this isn't going to fix the story, but it'll at least give a plausible explanation. This is a good point. If you want the concept of the Aishi curse to work, one could change it from being a curse into a, quote, self-fulfilling prophecy. This will give the characters a reason to always do the same thing generation after generation, as they have convinced themselves to do this out of necessity. Another very controversial part of Yandere Simulator's lore concerns one of the rivals, specifically Mita Rana. She is the 7th of the 10 rivals in the game, meaning she appears during the 7th week of school. Anyway, Mita has proven to be the most controversial rival of Yandere Simulator. Many videos and posts discuss why she is horrible and should not be in the game. Explanation of Mita's predatory behavior. In her character sheet, it states that her hobby is seducing schoolboys, and that once she goes to Academia High School, she will quickly begin hunting for new prey and Senpai will catch her attention. The glorification of Mita's predatory behavior. Mita Rana's revealing character design, sensual dialogue, and overall presentation are portrayed as sexy and attractive in Yandere Simulator, but it's very disturbing to do this to an adult who hits on teenage boys. Mita Rana's lack of personality. Mita Rana's bio, unlike Osana's, does not give out any useful information that explains her behavior. The only thing you can find is the repetitive amount of times it is stated that Mita Rana likes teenage boys, making her bio just a dry dessert of pedophilia. It becomes evident as to why everyone hates the concept of Mita Rana. Her character is borderline predatory and extremely inappropriate for a game like Yandere Simulator, let alone most games in general. It becomes even worse when you remember that all of the students at Academia are barely 18, with some likely being underage. That puts into perspective how bad Mita Rana's character is. Due to how creepy Mita's character is, fans have created their own rewrites to make her not as bad of a character. Some of them involve giving her a new personality and backstory, while others have made it so her true intentions are more obvious. I would make it more obvious that she is grooming such manipulating senpai and not a love interest. The concept of her being a predator is one that I like, since it's not something done often, and with the right mindset can be done amazingly, as long as she is considered that. Knowing Pedo Dev, she will always be just a love interest, which shows more about him than anyone else. Make her a student that tutors instead of being a pervert. Make her not an actual threat but still have Ayano think she is. Like maybe Mita has to tutor Taro and they form a kind of mother-son type relationship, but Ayano sees it as Mita trying to manipulate him. Paint her as a villain. Our main goal is to eliminate her. Maybe we also have to protect Samson from the evil teacher. Who the hell is Samson? All in all, Mita Rana is definitely one of the most problematic characters within Yandere Simulator. Most fans dislike her as a whole, with her backstory and personality being a clear example of why. Another complaint about Yandere Simulator's lore has to do with Ryoba's trial. For those who don't know, Ryoba's trial was the in-game event that determined whether or not she got away with murdering the 10 rivals in 1980s mode. Even though not too many people have criticized this part of the game, a few people have shared quite a lot of information regarding their dislike of the trial. Reddit user Qtum summarized their thoughts saying, quote, "One thing that I can talk about forever was the complete unprofessionalness of the 1980s mode trial, and that the only reason Ryoba won the trial was because Ayano would have never existed if she didn't. Basically just plot armor to keep it steady." You could definitely argue that Ryoba's trial was only created to allow Ayano to come into the story at a later point. However, Ryoba winning the trial does not always play out in-game. Depending on what the player does, she could be found guilty and the game ends there. Regardless, the official storyline of Ryoba being found innocent still stands. Believe it or not, Qtum has written in more depth about why they find Ryoba's trial to be flawed. In September 2024, they wrote a very long comment explaining their criticisms of Ryoba's trial in 1980s mode. However, since I'm too lazy to read all of it, we'll briefly summarize their comment. In summary, some of Qtum's issues with the trial included a lack of structure, Ryoba's behavior being suspicious, certain types of evidence being dismissed, statements being addressed inappropriately, and bias being present. Should I make a video talking about Ryoba's trial? Let me know in the comments below. Another notable complaint about the lore of Yandere Simulator is how it's all over the place. This was one of the more common criticisms on Reddit, meaning that fans clearly have an issue with it. User OKStruggle5695 has written about this, stating, quote, "My problem is that the story is literally everywhere and it gets more tangled. The whole story of the Aishin Psycho families, Succubus sisters, now Ayano's grandmother and Ryoba's mother. Everything is literally stacked one after another, and not in a good way." When you think about it, the lore of Yandere Simulator does have a lot of parts that are not connected whatsoever. In addition to this, fans have also stated that parts of the lore are not fully utilized. Reddit user Sweet Tooth T shared examples of this, saying, quote, "The lack of use of everything in the game. Like, you have a money system that only works for a dude in the alley rather than the overall game. You have supernatural or epic lore that doesn't show or be explored in the game, and when it does, it gets glossed over. An obvious way to fix this issue is to organize the lore so everything is not cluttered. Whether this leads to lore being removed or reworked entirely, organizing the game's lore so that it's not all over the place will make things a lot better." Another controversial part of Yandere Simulator's lore is the backstory of Witness-chan. In case you don't know, Yui Tsunesu, also known as Witness-chan, is one of the characters found in 1980s mode. She first appeared in the game as a character named Witness-chan, but was removed for a while before reappearing as a maid, then re-added into 1980s mode. Anyway, she had a backstory that proved very controversial among fans of Yandere Simulator. What was this backstory? Prepare your ears. Near the end of the Cold War, aka 1989, some incidents happened in Witness-chan's classroom, where random girls would find some white liquid on their belongings. You probably know what kind of white liquid this is. Witness-chan realized that some male student was doing this gross behavior. She was friends with a boy who confessed to the class that he was behind those incidents. This led to him being bullied for the remainder of the school year. Sometime after graduating high school, Witness-chan found out that the boy was being blackmailed into committing these acts. Why? The girl hated some of her classmates and forced the boy to jizz all over their items. He ended up confessing to free himself from the blackmail. Needless to say, Witness-chan felt guilty for this. She believed she would have figured everything out if she had paid more attention to her surroundings. This incident is the reason why Witness-chan is nosy as fuck. After reading all of this, it becomes very obvious why this backstory was extremely controversial among fans of Yandere Simulator. No, because that shit was so unnecessary. Why is the first idea he thinks of when asked why is Yui so paranoid have to do with jizz? My honest reaction to reading that. Please excuse me while I gouge out my eyeballs. Doki Doki Literature Club character using raid. Yeah, I don't really know what to say for that one. The story doesn't end there though. It was revealed that this plotline was stolen from a manga titled Onani Master Kurosawa, I think. Surprisingly, this is not a hentai manga. So, on top of being very disgusting, Witness-chan's backstory wasn't even original. Thankfully, this is no longer Witness-chan's backstory. She got a new one later. Still, Witness-chan's original backstory proved to be very controversial among fans of Yandere Simulator. This criticism was one that I actually found pretty interesting. Reddit user Sky the Weird Idiot replied to our post commenting, quote, "I feel like Yandere devs should either give lore to every character or none at all and focus on the schoolgirl murdering to get her crush aspect of the game. I see a lot of people saying that there's so much unneeded lore in the game, but to be fair, it is his game and he can do what he wants with it. But my main issue is how some characters are way more developed than others. If there's going to be character lore, then develop lore for everyone, not just random characters." What Sky is essentially saying is that the amount of lore between the characters is imbalanced. They use Megami as an example, writing, quote, "Megami is very obviously way more developed story-wise than the rest of the rivals, so much so that she's been deemed a Mary Sue by the fandom." This connects back to the section dedicated to her, where fans have deemed Megami a Mary Sue. Sky did propose a solution to this issue, which is to give lore to all of the in-game characters. I actually agree with this, as it would cause the world of Yandere Simulator to have more personality. It would also lead to none of the characters standing out as much as Megami currently does. They wrote, "If all of the rivals had some extremely developed lore like Megami, and Megami's lore and planned gameplay style was toned down a bit, I feel like she wouldn't be called a Mary Sue anymore." If Sky's solution to this problem was implemented, it would likely lead to fans no longer calling Megami a Mary Sue. Believe it or not, Academy has received criticism from fans. One criticism that's popped up is how all of the students are the same age. This makes sense considering how in high school, everyone's age is somewhat varied. For example, freshmen are either 14 or 15, sophomores are either 15 or 16, juniors are either 16 or 17, and seniors are either 17 or 18. However, this is not the case in Yandere Simulator, where everyone is, quote, the same age. User Scarlet_Sky has written about this, stating, quote, "The whole cosplay university, everyone is exactly 18 nonsense. He should either make it a high school and have them all be 15 to 18, or make it a college and have them be 18 to 21. But having everyone in the school be exactly 18 makes no sense. Especially when you consider that some students are outright stated to have been there for multiple years, which means that these students are all the exact same age even though they're in different grade levels. And it gets even stupider when Hanako shows up and she's the exact same age as her supposedly older brother. Considering the fact that everyone is the same age, this makes it difficult to determine whether Academy is a high school or a college. I said it's because the ages of a high school senior and a college freshman are both 18. Therefore, Academy would have to be specifically stated to either be a college or a high school to avoid confusion. Speaking of everyone, Morphig5840 wrote, "If all students are 18 or older, then why are they going back to high school when they could be working or going to a university? What is the reason?" That's a very fair point. I have nothing more to say on that. Another part of the Yandere Simulator lore fans have criticized is the Psycho family. For some, the very idea of the Psycho family is enough to dislike them. Some have even said that they straight up don't like the family at all. An example of this comes from the Reddit user Sakai Krill, who wrote, "I just don't like anything about it at this point. Sure, the lore is interesting, but the characters really aren't. It feels like Alex just wrote random things into the backstory and the lore of this family to make it cool, mysterious, and edgy. But it feels more like some plot that a 6th grader wrote for their imaginary Undertale alternate universe or something." The idea of the Psycho family being unnecessary to the plot of Yandere Simulator is a common one. Linny Yan is another user who believes this, writing, quote, "Everything in the lore is about them and it's extremely irritating." It's clear that a lot of people are not a fan of the Psycho family as a whole. It has been suggested that the Psycho family would be better suited to having a game about them only, which is honestly fair. Considering how much lore is known about the Psycho family, a game dedicated to just them would make a lot of sense. One complaint that fans have had about the lore of Yandere Simulator has to do with InfoChan. For those who don't know, InfoChan is one of the characters in Yandere Simulator. Her main purpose is to provide the player with various services that can help aid them. Anyway, InfoChan has been a subject of criticism over the years. Reddit user FarmMammoth3214 wrote, "Why does this random girl want to help Ayano? Why does she get this room all to herself? Why does the faculty allow this? Why does she have access to random items like drugs or various poisons? Where are her parents? Are they alive? In mission mode, how does she recognize Nemesis?" It does make sense that fans would question the role of InfoChan. After all, the question of how she got to her position has not been answered in great detail. Reddit user Morphig5840 summed up their criticisms of InfoChan as the following. Have a room just for her, gets information about everybody and decides to help Ayano makes no sense. Not to mention her being allowed in school when I don't even know the basics like her real name. The latter part has somewhat been explained, as InfoChan supposedly blackmailed the headmaster of academia to allow her to be there. Whether or not this is a good explanation is up for debate. If InfoChan had a bit more of a backstory and had her mechanics changed, I could see her becoming much more popular within the Yandere Simulator community. I know the title of this section sounds weird, but it'll make sense. Reddit user Apathetic Robbins wrote the following comment in the replies to our post. The reason that the suitors can always find a rival they have a crush on, even when she's dead, is because they all wear a very strong perfume that they can track down. Like dogs, I guess. It gives a funny mental image, but it makes absolutely no sense. I actually did not know this was a thing. That being said, I could not find a mention of this piece of trivia on the Yandere Simulator wiki. Therefore, take it with a grain of salt. I do agree that it's stupid though. Apathetic Robbins also wrote the following about this piece of trivia. Why can't Raibaru sniff out Osana but Kyuji can? In Japan, it's considered rude to use too much fragrance. Well, tough luck to computer science majors. So this doesn't really make sense. Why is there not a gameplay option to steal the rival's perfume so the suitor cannot track her? And last but not least, no perfume is strong enough for someone to be able to sniff out the person using it from across the school campus. If this is indeed the case, then it's definitely one of the dumber pieces of trivia about Yandere Simulator. Again, I could not find this being officially mentioned anywhere, so take that piece of trivia with a grain of salt. Speaking of the Psycho family, another complaint regarding the Yandere Simulator lore has to do with Megami Psycho, the supposed 10th rival. A majority of complaints regarding Megami are about her being, quote, too perfect and flawless. This is very understandable, as this both makes her unlikable and unrealistic. In a post dedicated to Megami's flaws, user FormerLaugh269 writes, "She just feels insanely overpowered compared to everyone else. Now of course we only have 2 of the 2020X rivals, but she already seems leagues above Osana with her bodyguard, and am I mostly surrounded by the cooking club. And then Megami is just this unkillable invincible goddess, which yes fits her stupid translated name, but makes her seem extremely unfun. Everything mentioned previously has also led to Megami being seen as an impossible final boss." Reddit user Floresita Sonic has spoken about this, stating, quote, "Megami should just be replaced in general. She sounds like a pain in the ass rather than a fun and challenging final boss." The amount of lore known about her adds to this, but we'll discuss that later. If changes were made to Megami's character, I feel like fans would receive her a lot better. Yeah, the title of this section was a joke. However, this will make sense in a bit. Reddit user .1weirdo Julia replied to our post saying, quote, "I was asking questions, and Yandere Dev stated that the Aishis start in the 1800s, and the oldest living Aishi is 133, but that means their senpai is still alive. Because I asked what happens if the senpai dies, and he said they commit suicide. I can't lie, I wasn't sure if this was actually the case. After all, the oldest living human ever, Jean Calment, lived to be 122 years old. However, I found comments on the Yandere Simulator wiki that confirmed this to have been the case at one point. There is also an old Google Doc that states, Yandere-chan's great-great-great-grandmother is still alive. So, at one point, Ayano's third great-grandmother was indeed still alive. It makes sense why one would find this piece of trivia really annoying, as it's not realistic. However, this has been retconned and Ayano's third great-grandmother is now dead. One notable complaint about the lore of Yandere Simulator is how it is poorly executed. In the comments of a different post I made, user such a creative name 12 wrote, I would also say this. The way the lore is delivered is also unenjoyable. It's supposed to be Ayano's story, yet she lacks agency in her own narrative. She's being tugged along by InfoChan and being told what to do, instead of utilizing Ayano's pre-existing knowledge. Yet Ayano is unnecessarily reliant on InfoChan to do things for her. Why does she need to be told to stalk Osana like a pet by InfoChan? Ayano stalks Taro. She on her own intuition should investigate and determine for herself whether or not the girls are a threat. To be honest, I did not think of Ayano's character this way. She could definitely be doing everything in game herself, yet she relies on someone like InfoChan to get certain items and do certain tasks for her. Such a creative name 12 further wrote, instead we have this omnipotent character, InfoChan, that just somehow knows everything and just dumps lore and character information. Alex releases all these lore bits, but they don't actually make the story more intriguing or any more engageful. The way it's delivered is boring, spoon-fed, or obscure, and Ayano the character rarely ever has thoughts or speculations of her own. With the existence of InfoChan, it takes away some of the player's ability to discover the game's lore completely on their own. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing is up for debate. Some have also argued that the addition of InfoChan makes them question whether Yandere Dev even cares about Ayano at all. To this end, such a creative name 12 wrote, as I'm typing this I'm even questioning if Alex even really cares about Ayano that much. Ryoba has a far more interesting story. If anything, the lore bits add to make her more menacing and her more engaging as a character in 1980s mode. People like Ryoba, InfoChan, the entire Psycho family, and even Mission Mode Nemesis get more development and relevance than Ayano when it's just supposed to be a story about a yandere high school girl with a crush. Like, what is even going on? The fact that other characters such as Ryoba, InfoChan, and the Psycho family have more lore than Ayano is pretty telling of the game's priorities. Once again, we return to the Psycho family. For those who don't know, the Psycho family is one of two prominent families in Yandere Simulator. They are notably the owners of Academy and Psycho Corp. Anyway, why is the Psycho family featured in this video? There is a lot of lore about them that fans of Yandere Simulator hate. For example, fans do not like the idea of the Psycho family supporting eugenics. In case you don't know, eugenics is, quote, the selection of desired heritable characteristics in order to improve future generations, typically in reference to humans. It's basically the practice of making desirable traits appear within the human population. YouTuber Disturbing History made a really good video explaining the subject, so make sure to go watch that for more context. Anyway, in Yandere Simulator's lore, the founder of Psycho Corp, Saisho Psycho, was a supporter of eugenics. However, he never actually shared this publicly so as to not ruin his reputation. Fans of Yandere Simulator have brought up this piece of lore time and time again when discussing the worst parts of the game's lore. Am I the only one who doesn't like all the eugenic stuff in the Psycho's lore? I'm sure most of us don't like it. It's so unnecessary in a game about a yandere anime girl trying to win over her love interest. It was interesting, but for me, it was just another, ugh, here comes the quirky Psycho lore again. That eugenic stuff seems befitting for an anime-inspired setting though, so I'm not very icky with it. I don't like the Psycho lore in general, just make the game functional. Considering the extremely controversial history of eugenics, it's very understandable as to why fans have taken issue with this piece of Yandere Simulator lore. One other issue we'll discuss regarding the Psycho family involves Megami's backstory. What is this backstory? Megami's father made her kill her pet hamster at 7 years old to prove her loyalty to the family. This tradition was started by Saisho, who did it to Megami's father, who then did it to Megami. Despite resisting, Megami eventually killed her hamster, signing it as a, quote, rite of passage. You can see why many fans of Yandere Simulator do not like this piece of lore. Would work if Yandere Dev wasn't so fixated in animal deaths as a way to do cheap traumatic situations. Why does Yandev have to kill an animal to make a character deep? Cause he doesn't know how to write an actual story. I want to feel bad about it, but the only thing that comes to my mind is how Megami is Walmart's Wednesday. Cringe, animal abuse isn't a plot point and it's very overused in this gross ass game. Should I make a separate video about why fans don't like the Psycho family? Let me know in the comments below. One more controversial part of Yandere Simulator's lore has to do with the male students at Academy. Supposedly, all of the male students at Academy buy penny shots from InfoChan. Yeah, that's the piece of lore. According to the game's lore, every male student at Academy participates in this kind of behavior. This piece of lore makes no sense, considering how not every male student is the type of person to do that. Fans have shared their complaints about this piece of Yandere Simulator lore. In fact, when asked about the most fucked up lore within Yandere Simulator, this was the top complaint. Everything, to be honest, especially the one about all boys supposedly being perverts purchasing panty shots from InfoChan. It doesn't even make sense for some of the boys to be doing that because some don't care or don't like it, or some don't believe InfoChan is real. It literally makes no sense at all. He's really trying to tell me that Budo of all people buys panty shots? The martial arts club leader who likes to set a good example? Nah. This has gotta be his way of deterring people from shipping Ayano with non-senpai boys. The mechanic of panty shots is controversial in its own right, but involving the male students of academia just brings this piece of lore to a whole new level of problematic. Like we said earlier, not every male character has the personality to do something like this. I know, right? Other students like Kazu, Otohiko, and Geiju definitely seem like they would never. So I wouldn't even buy it for a second, especially considering how unrealistic it would be for all boys to be perverts. Same for Ryoto and the leader of the photography club. Just seems completely out of character for them. Or Tsukibi Dooby-Doo. I forgot about that stupid ass name. It makes sense why fans would have a massive problem with this piece of lore. It just doesn't make sense when one thinks about it. How would you change this piece of Yandere Simulator lore? Let us know in the comments below. The final complaint we'll be sharing in this video has to do with the lore seemingly being made up randomly. What do I mean by this? Essentially, fans have claimed that Yandere Dev creates lore without considering how it'll fit into the world of Yandere Simulator. Reddit user Baba Baba Ye wrote about this, stating, quote, "It's so much but so little at the same time. It just feels like Yandere Dev gets an idea and writes it into the lore without even considering how it's going to connect to the rest of the story he made, or how he's even going to put it in the game in the first place." What they're saying is that whenever Yandere Dev comes up with an idea for lore, he just adds it without questioning if it'll make sense within the game's story. Considering everything we've talked about regarding the lore in this video, you could see why this criticism was brought up. In addition, Baba O'Reilly stated, whenever he even asks himself questions about it in videos, he'll just get all smug and go all, "You'll just have to wait and see," emoji. Bro, it's been 10 years, just tell us. Also, the fact that he contradicts himself too. He definitely does not have a clear timeline written down and is just placing things down wherever he thinks fits. Baba also states that Yandere Simulator does not have an objective timeline, which is likely a result of some of the game's lore being made up on the spot. It would definitely help if a clear timeline for Yandere Simulator was established, as it will make it easier for fans to keep track of the game's story. What do you think though? Let me know in the comments below. One issue fans have with the Aishi family is that their story is too repetitive. Essentially, the argument is that there are elements in the lore of the Aishi family that are reused. The most notable aspect is how Aishi and her senpai get together. Reddit user I Eat Batteries wrote about this, stating, quote, "Heavy on repetitiveness. Like, I understand that's how they unlock feeling normal, so to speak, but the way that the senpai has been met the exact same way for generations is annoying as hell. There is so much unexplored potential with Aishis because I refuse to accept the canon plural, and their senpai, but Alex is such a gooner that he wants every senpai man to get Alex's own fairy tale of meeting in high school and being kidnapped by Makati. It does start to seem weird when thinking about it. Not every member of the Aishi family acts the same way, so you would expect them to deal with their senpais using different methods. However, this is not the case within the lore of Yandere Simulator. If the creator wants the story to be more logical, he should change it so that every Aishi gets with their senpai differently. Doing this would make that lore aspect less repetitive and bring more variety. Another Reddit user also complained about this, writing, quote, "As much as I like the lore and how I don't mind it so long, it's repetitive. The senpai bit is usually the same and it makes it look weird." It makes sense why people would complain about this, as this would not happen in real life. It's likely that every member of the family did not get with their partner in the same exact way. If the creator of Yandere Simulator changes this part of the family to be more realistic, fans of the game would likely receive the Aishi family more positively. Another issue fans have with the Aishi family is how detailed their story is compared to the game. We know a lot of lore about the Aishi family. This comes in the form of basement tapes, different characters existing, and lore told by the creator himself. However, some fans have complained how there is too much lore about the Daishi family compared to that of the game itself. This was actually one of the more common complaints from fans, being brought up several times in our thread. Reddit user Puppy Doggy Girl was one of many who talked about this, writing, quote, "While the lore for the older Aishis are interesting, I don't really think they're that important to the main story. I'm alright with knowing about the first Daishi, Ryoba, and Dozuki, but the rest of the family between them like Kataba isn't really that important to know about." This is honestly very understandable, as the actual game doesn't showcase anyone outside of Ayano and Ryoba. Why do we need to see characters such as Dozuki if they're not actually going to appear in the game? Reddit user FuzzyWonder8107 also echoed this sentiment, writing, quote, "Why should I personally care about Kataba, Ayano's cousin, her aunt, or any other family member that doesn't even appear in the game at all? I guess it's nice for additional lore, but they don't really serve a purpose for the main plot of the game." These complaints do make sense. If they do not have direct relevance to the game's overall story, why even mention them? That being said, if the main game ever gets completed, then it wouldn't be a bad idea to expand upon Ayano's relatives. For now though, it's fair to say the Aishi family lore is too detailed. We don't need to know as much as we currently do about them. We touched on this criticism in a previous video, but it makes sense to discuss it again. Fans have complained about the Aishi curse. Some people have said it's unnecessary, while others have stated that it's a bad excuse for explaining Ayano's personality. Reddit user FuzzyWinder8107 also complained about this, writing, quote, "I just generally don't like the whole Aishi curse thing. The curse is Alex's excuse to make Ayano emotionless because he says he got criticized for Ayano's personality in older concepts of the game. It just doesn't feel really creative to me. I was fine with the other idea that Ayano is emotionless is because you're making her what you see her as, which works because you do play as her. Using a curse to explain the protagonist's lack of emotions can definitely come off as lazy. One can interpret the curse as the game's creator not having a good way to explain Ayano's lack of emotions." Fuzzy Wonder is not the only user who has made this criticism about the Aishi curse. Reddit user Makai08 also wrote about this a few months ago, stating, quote, "The Aishi family suffering a generational curse. Like, it really just doesn't make any sense to me, and it's not helped by the fact that there is zero explanation for this curse even existing in the first place. Did it just happen out of nowhere? Did one of Ayano's ancestors perform a ritual that went wrong and that's how the bloodline got cursed? I know that I've already featured his comments in a previous video, but it still shows the issues some people have with the Aishi curse. Since then, however, an explanation for the curse has been given. Basically, the Basu sisters and their relatives are likely responsible for the existence of the Aishi curse. Whether or not this is a good explanation is up for debate. How do you feel about the Aishi curse? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. You're probably wondering what this section is about. Don't worry, it'll make sense in a bit. This argument basically states that Ayano's relatives are more interesting than Ayano herself. It's weird because Ayano is the protagonist of Yandere Simulator, yet she's not that interesting. On the other hand, her relatives have quite a bit going for them. This becomes a problem once you realize that Ayano, who is the main character, is supposed to be one of the most detailed characters in the game. Reddit user Stuck at a Roadblock has written about this issue, stating, quote, "What everyone else has said, the fact that the other family members are more interesting than the main protagonist. I think that stems from that time when Dev wanted to make Ayano a highly customizable character that the player can design to their liking. He needs to make up his mind about Ayano. Either make her a character with a real personality, or lean into the whole character creation thing. Considering that Ayano is literally the protagonist of Yandere Simulator, you would expect her to have a more fleshed out personality. However, this does not seem to be the case. Instead, Ayano is just a character that serves to carry out the tasks in Yandere Simulator. If Ayano had a bit more of a backstory, I could see fans liking her a lot more." While doing research for this video, I found out that Stuck at a Roadblock actually wrote about this exact issue back in March 2024. They wrote, quote, "Give her a real personality like her mother instead of making her anime Agent 47. Dev Zaster likes to justify it with Aishi conditioned this and Aishi conditioned that, but it's a poor excuse to not give any flavor to the protagonist. The best we're gonna get is giving her our own spice as the player and customizing her, I feel like." The latter part is actually a counter-argument people have given to Ayano not having a personality. Due to the fact that she has no personality, the player can make her whatever kind of person they want. That in itself can act as a way to fix this issue. What do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. One more criticism of the Aishi family we'll be discussing has to do with the family itself. It's the opposite of the previous section, where instead of Ayano being the least interesting character, it's most of the Aishi family. I find this interesting because I feel like people would view the rest of the Aishi family as being more appealing characters. This will be due to them having more of a backstory than Ayano. However, some people have argued that most of the Aishi family is full of uninteresting characters. Reddit user Miss Skinny Jean wrote about this, stating, quote, "Besides the obligatory shouldn't exist / Pseudo dev should focus on the game more, I find it odd that there's Kataba and the Aishi precursor, which are pretty much portrayed as badasses that face off against demons and work for the CIA and blah blah blah, and then you get to the rest and they're just generic suburban family affair. Like, the only other Aishi that's even remotely interesting is Ayano's cousin, who is not only a generic punk but doesn't even have her own name yet. This is actually very interesting. Despite the fact that Ayano's relatives have more information that is known, that does not make them more interesting. Yeah, it's one thing to have a developed backstory, but if that backstory is not that detailed, then the character becomes less interesting. You could argue that this goes together with the idea of other Aishis not needing to exist. If some of the members are not that interesting, why do we even need to know about them? They already don't have any relevance to the game's overall story. That would also make them uninteresting, giving fans less reason to even know about them. Who do you think is more boring, Ayano or her extended family? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I want to see which of the two final criticisms you all agree with more. Perhaps the biggest complaint about InfoChan is that her character is pointless. This is actually the top comment that I have seen when it comes to InfoChan as a character. Essentially, the argument is that InfoChan does not serve any real purpose in Yandere Simulator. She basically just exists. Reddit user FarPomegranate5537 wrote a comment about this, stating, quote, "My problem isn't that she lacks a personality, that applies to basically every character, but the fact that she serves no real purpose. I honestly think that a tutorial plus the hairdresser are enough." Another user, SourCakeYT, also echoed this sentiment, stating, quote, "I forgot she fucking exists because she has no personality, no major appearances, no cool voice lines or anything." It's funny because if one tries to think about qualities that make InfoChan stand out, almost nothing will come to mind. Well, if a quality does come to mind, it's not one that would be considered good by most people. In addition to this, InfoChan does not serve as more than a guide or tutorial character. She merely guides the player on how to achieve certain tasks in Yandere Simulator. We'll return to this point later. User Lin Yan also wrote about InfoChan being a pointless character, stating, quote, "To be honest, she's kinda useless. All of the things she gave to us, we could just buy in the stores. I know she's probably the journalist's daughter and etc, but like, this is so unoriginal. And if she betrays Ayano because of that, it's just so stupid, like, she got revenge on Ryoba, not on Ryoba's daughter. This is dumb and does not make any sense." This is understandable. If some of InfoChan's services can be bought from other individuals, what purpose does she even serve? Yandere Simulator does benefit from having a tutorial for new players to reference, but InfoChan should not be the entire tutorial for the game. Speaking of tutorials, one complaint fans of Yandere Simulator have is that InfoChan does not serve as anything more than a tutorial character. This one's weird because she's also been referred to as a debug menu, if that makes sense. Reddit user Crazed Grape wrote about this, stating, quote, "It just feels like Chalex abandoned her and turned her into a tutorial. She doesn't have any agency, wants anything, and I don't even know why she's helping Ayano do all of this. She's just a creepy human garden gnome that helps the player and does nothing else." It's crazy because you would think that she'd have a backstory, as she's a character that exists. However, most of InfoChan's actions just revolve around her giving the player instructions. That's not really a good backstory for a character to have, if you can even call it a backstory. It's good that a tutorial exists for Yandere Simulator, but it should not exist in the form of a character. Remember when I said InfoChan has also been referred to as a debug menu? Reddit user Louis the Rockstar posted a comment about this, writing, quote, "She serves more as a convenient debug menu. Most of the items you can get from her are things you can get from around the school, around town, etc. She doesn't provide hints to the player. Instead, she just flat out gives a tutorial that requires no thinking skills. As a plot element, she removes the agency in Ayano's motives. Instead of it being Ayano discovering the rivals on her own and getting rid of them on her own accord, the game frames it as Ayano just blindly going after whatever girl InfoChan directs her towards, which only further strips her of the yandere aspect of her character. Another problem with InfoChan is that she doesn't let the player figure stuff out for themselves. Instead, she directly shares information on how to do certain tasks in Yandere Simulator. For some people, this is something that would make them not like InfoChan. This also creates issue within the lore of Yandere Simulator. InfoChan guiding Ayano on doing anything in-game takes away Ayano's ability to do things herself. Essentially, InfoChan takes away some of Ayano's ability to make her own decisions. What do you think of InfoChan being a tutorial character? Let us know in the comments below. This complaint is one I didn't realize until making this video. Essentially, InfoChan is committing literal crimes through her in-game currency. What do we mean by this? Reddit user Needleworker wrote about this, stating quote, "If we put aside that everyone is 18 or older BS, she's literally selling CSEM, since all the penny shots are from underage girls and are taken and sold without their consent. Doesn't matter that she's also a minor, it's still a crime even if she tells Ayano to do it for her. I also don't like how much of her behavior reminds me of the allegations." The idea of InfoChan being a criminal is not that surprising, especially considering the nature of what she does. However, the specific type of crime explained by Needleworker is a very problematic one. If one were to think about the concept behind InfoChan's currency, it becomes very clear that they are inappropriate pictures of minors. Possessing this type of material will be considered a crime in the real world, so that makes her currency a whole lot worse. Needle's point about InfoChan's age not meaning anything is a pretty important one, as it also applies to real life. In summary, InfoChan's preferred currency has been deemed problematic by fans of Yandere Simulator. One complaint about InfoChan that I find pretty interesting is that she does not fit within the story of Yandere Simulator. Essentially, the argument is that InfoChan's character doesn't fit well within the universe of the game. She could be removed from the game, and its plot would not be affected. Reddit user Baba talked about this, writing quote, "She fit into the game back in the day, but now the story seems so full that she doesn't really fit into anywhere clearly anymore. Now that Ayano has a family of murderers and even a family friend hairdresser who gives her advice, is there really a need for InfoChan anymore if you're not a new player? Don't get me wrong, I loved InfoChan when I was younger and would still like to see her in the game, but she's one of the biggest examples of Yandev wanting everything in his story without considering how it would flow narratively. She almost has no impact on the lore and can be erased from Ayano's world without changing anything. I wish that Yandev would just confirm her as the journalist's daughter already so that she can be relevant without being some creepy maybe lesbian who uses penny shots as currency. This complaint is understandable, considering the amount of lore that Yandere Simulator has. Since basically anything that could be asked has been explained in-game, where can InfoChan even fit in? Every one of her traits can be seen elsewhere in the game, so we don't really need to go to InfoChan to do a majority of the tasks. She's pretty much rendered obsolete within the game's universe. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. One more complaint about InfoChan that people have shared is her personality being unclear. Specifically, InfoChan's character is somewhat hidden from the player, making it hard to determine who exactly she's supposed to be. Reddit user Stuck at a Roadblock wrote about this, stating quote, "I don't understand what she's supposed to be character-wise. It feels like Dev wanted a Diana Burnwood for his anime girl Hitman game but without the character development and slight bloodlust for no particular reason. I'm starting to buy that InfoChan is the secret antagonist and she's gathering evidence against Ayano theory, because why else would InfoChan's personality, name, and intentions be hidden from us? I can see how the lack of information about InfoChan's character would cause one to think this. Without the necessary information about her being available, it's hard to figure out what kind of person she is meant to be. Of course, she's known to be someone with malicious intentions, but we don't really know anything beyond that. This actually connects back to the first complaint featured in this video, as having an unclear personality could render InfoChan pointless. Do you think InfoChan's personality should be more elaborate? Let us know in the comments below. Perhaps the biggest complaint about Megami Psycho is that she is too perfect. This makes her become known as a Mary Sue, which is a character that has no flaws or imperfections. Essentially, Megami is a character who has no significant imperfections or flaws, which has brought a lot of criticism towards her. Reddit user InternalC4526 wrote about this, stating quote, "She's the definition of a Mary Sue. I understand she's the final boss, but plenty of final bosses aren't perfect. They have flaws so that way we can use those flaws to beat the final boss, but she doesn't. He needs to give her something or some reason to slip up so we can beat her." That is actually a good point. Considering that Megami is supposed to be the final rival of Yandere Simulator, she'd definitely be the hardest to beat. However, like all bosses, Megami should at least have some flaws so that the player can exploit them. Doing so would help them beat Megami and therefore complete Yandere Simulator. At the current moment though, Megami does not have any flaws that can be used against her. Some fans have suggested solutions to this problem however, a few of which are pretty creative. Reddit user Excellent2 suggested a way to make Megami flawed. They wrote, quote, "She's too perfect. I'd like her to have something about her that's not perfect. Maybe that she's so obsessed with being perfect that she has mental breakdowns." I actually like this solution. It's also quite realistic, as those who try to be perfect will try but ultimately fail to do so. This realization would probably drive Megami to have mental breakdowns. One more point I do want to say is that Megami's perfection is a flaw in itself. Due to the fact that she has no flaws, that makes her a flawed character. It's just an idea that I believe in being applied to Megami Psycho. How would you fix the issue of Megami being a flawless character? Leave your answers in the comments below. Another notable complaint about Megami Psycho is that she has little to no personality. This criticism can apply to practically every character in Yandere Simulator. However, this has been used to describe Megami quite a bit. Reddit user Crazed Grape wrote about this, stating, quote, "Megami's personality and past are about as deep as a puddle, despite having so much potential to be an interesting character. You could replace her with a broom, and I feel like that broom would somehow have more personality than Megami." Another Reddit user, Kappa King, also wrote about this, saying, quote, "She's boring. Her personality is just doing whatever the plot wants." Considering how Megami is a supposedly flawless character, that makes it so that there's nothing interesting about her personality. She becomes a boring person. We've seen the same criticism be applied to pretty much every major character in Yandere Simulator, so it has definitely come up again and again. How can this issue be fixed? Several people have shared their own solutions, one of which we'll be showing. For example, Kappa King suggested the following. I mean, wouldn't it be cool if she had a split personality? The reason she's not is that she was attending the school as someone else the entire time. Her mind split due to her ego needing to be perfect at all times. While her other self is clumsy, shy, and carefree, maybe she's very ditty. Her story could be that she started liking senpai as her other self and those feelings bled into her Megami self. A way to eliminate her is to bring her two halves together and have her realize that both girls are her and that she doesn't need to be perfect. This is a pretty good solution, not gonna lie. Her having two personalities that eventually combine is a very creative way to give Megami more personality. It'd be interesting to see Megami having two sides to her that conflict with each other. Her having to fight her inner demons and eventually realize both sides can exist together will be awesome to see in game. What do you think of this? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. One complaint that I found pretty interesting was how Megami's appearance looked weird. Complaints of this type came up quite a lot in the Reddit thread regarding criticisms of Megami. Reddit user OkNotABanana commented about this, writing, quote, "I don't know anything about her character, but her design is so weird. Like, what's wrong with her shirt and why is she wearing those ugly matching stockings and gloves? She could be cool, but she's so ugly." Another Reddit user, Hakazumi, also wrote about Megami's appearance, stating, quote, "I can get past the long ass socks, they're cute, but the gloves are too much. The choker doesn't feel in character either, even for fetishized Japan. It's more of a Western thing, and even then, it's only really present in specific cultural circles. It honestly surprised me just how many people had an issue with Megami's appearance. Fans have constantly criticized the appearances of most of the female students in Yandere Simulator, primarily with their outfits. That makes sense, as their skirts tend to be depicted in a certain way. Thankfully, this doesn't seem to be the case with Megami. However, the specific complaints are regarding her stockings and choker. I can understand the latter, as I've never seen anyone wear a choker outside of some specific subcultures. There was an additional argument that I honestly found fascinating. Reddit user Indecisive Skull responded to Hakazumi, adding, quote, "Also, she's meant to be the elite student council president, but she breaks the most uniform regulations in her design, which kinda makes her look like she's against the institution she's a part of. It's funny how her outfit makes her appear to be part of the counterculture of academia. That's pretty ironic, considering she's literally a member of the authority of the school. This was most likely not intentional, however. How would you fix Megami's appearance? Leave your answers in the comments below. I feel like this point can be debated among fans of Yandere Simulator. Another complaint that fans have had about Megami is that she is not unique. We mean this in that there's nothing about her that stands out. Even though it may sound a bit exaggerated, it'll make sense in a bit. Reddit user What4270 wrote about this, stating quote, "For someone who is supposed to be the perfect student council president student trope, she's so basic. There's nothing worth pointing out as to why she's unique among the rivals except the fact that she's a student council president. And that's it." They end after a comment with a funny phrase, saying quote, "If she's a spice, she'd be flour." Even though it sounds a bit crazy, I do get where What4270 is coming from. Because Megami has no flaws, that leaves little to no qualities about her that make her unique. Any imperfections Megami could potentially have don't exist. This, in turn, doesn't allow for there to be anything interesting about her. One solution to this problem will be to give her flaws, as that would create something interesting about her character. This would also solve another problem we discussed, which is Megami being too perfect. Essentially, the solution can kill two birds with one stone. All in all, one of the less common but still valid criticisms of Megami is that she is not unique. I'll admit, I found his final complaint pretty funny. One more criticism fans have made about Megami is how she is incompatible with her love interest for hypocritical reasons. It may sound confusing, but we'll explain it in a bit. Reddit user Jonah Ruby Babies wrote a comment criticizing Megami, stating quote, "The fact Yondev thinks her and Kaga will be a good pair. Megami hates Ayana because of her strange behavior and how creepy she is, and she's considered a stalker in her eyes." Meanwhile, it's also confirmed that Kaga would go to the lengths of stalking Megami herself and marrying her, while also not having any attraction for her besides her family history. Is she supposed to be wooed by the fact that it's a man doing it? Essentially, Jonah is arguing that Megami should not be in love with Kaga because he's doing the exact same thing that makes her hate Ayano. For context, Megami deems Ayano creepy for stalking Senpai. However, Kaga would do the same thing to Megami, who seems to have no issue with it. It's definitely hypocritical, as if we were to be logical with this, Megami would also hate Kaga for being a stalker. This is not the case though, which doesn't make sense. This is honestly one of the more valid criticisms that fans have shared about Megami. How would you fix this problem? Let us know in the comments below. What if I told you that there is a YouTuber who's making disgusting videos within the Yandere Simulator community? People on social media have called this individual out for creating borderline fetish content. We'll be talking about them in this video. So, who is this YouTuber that we're talking about? They're one that goes by the name of Jang. They're one of the more prominent creators in the Yandere Simulator community, having over 275,000 subscribers as of April 2024. They've made one of the most popular Yandere Simulator shorts of all time, which has over 71 million views. All in all, they're a pretty popular creator. You're probably wondering why people have called out Jang on social media. It turns out that Jang has been accused of creating fetish content involving Yandere Simulator characters. What do we mean by this? Let's take their short titled Buy Your Waifu for example. It shows a list of characters with text below each one. At the top of the video, text can be seen that says Buy Your Waifu. Below that is a list of different actions that give different point values. For example, a like is equal to 10 points, a subscription is equal to 20 points, and a share is equal to 15 points. Below that are 5 different options, and this part is what makes this video in particular controversial. On the top left, the option Furry can be seen. This shows the count that is located behind Academy, which can be bought for $10. This is already weird enough as animals cannot be someone's waifu. Well, furries exist, but still. It gets worse from here, however. To the right of that is a picture of Ryoba with the caption MILF, who can be bought for $30. I guess Ryoba can qualify as one depending on who you're asking. Below that picture is one of My Waifu with the caption My Waifu, who can be bought for $45. That makes this option the most expensive one of the 5 shown. However, it gets really bad after this point. To the left of this option is an image of Child Ayano with the caption Lolly, who can be bought for $20. I'm pretty sure you can see why this specific photo is very problematic. It's basically saying that Child Ayano can be the viewer's waifu, which is very disgusting. The 5th and final photo is of Senpai wearing a female school outfit with the caption Trap, which can be bought for free. So, why is this video considered problematic? For one, some of the subjects shown should not be associated with being someone's waifu. The 2 biggest examples are the Grey Cat and the Child Ayano. Obviously, animals and children cannot be someone's lover. Doing so would result in literal crimes being committed. In addition to this, the word lolly being used simply gives the entire thing a more disgusting and pedophilic vibe. Something that I noticed while doing research for this video is that the comments on this YouTube short are disabled. Basically, no one can comment on the short. This is likely due to fans creating a backlash against Jang Jang, and as a result, she disabled them. Whether or not this is actually the case is unknown. People have written comments criticizing the YouTube short for being really weird. Reddit user I'm Here to Lurk lol wrote the following about the Buy Your Waifu short. Having a literal animal, not even some anthropomorphic one with the ability to think like humans but an actual pet, as an option for a wife as well as a literal child is foul, what the fuck. Another Reddit user, Perfect Muscle 5641, also criticized Jang Jang's short, writing quote, "Buy your waifu," and then putting Child Ayano for sale for $20 and naming her Lolly. It does not matter if Child Ayano is a fictional character, it's still represented as a child, and what Jang Jang did was predatory. All of these criticisms are pretty valid. There's really no reason for a video like this to exist. Just the concept alone is enough to raise a lot of eyebrows. Thankfully, people have started to call out the weirdness of this video. All in all though, this YouTube short is pretty weird. It makes sense why people have called it out for being problematic. YouTube shorts are not the only type of content that Jang Jang has faced backlash for. On July 3rd, 2024, Jang Jang uploaded a video titled "Turning a Male Student into Ayano's Pet." Just by the title alone, one can get an idea of why Jang Jang received a lot of backlash from fans. The video showcases the concept where the player can kidnap a random male student and turning them into their pet. This is achieved by cutting off the male student's limbs in Ayano's basement. Doing this will give the player numerous options for interacting with their pet. It feels wrong to say that, by the way. Some of these options include giving them food, taking the pet for a walk, changing its clothes, hugging, petting, and playing with it. I'm pretty sure you can tell why no one likes this concept. It's just very disgusting and weird, especially considering the fact that Ayano turns a literal human being into her pet. The concept in question is both dehumanizing and just straight up gross. I'm not the only one who finds this concept disgusting, as the original video has a 55% like to dislike ratio. Specifically, it has over 1,500 likes and 1,200 dislikes. People have clearly taken an issue with this specific video that Jang Jang has made. Something I do need to know is that the video in question has comments disabled, which was likely a response to people criticizing the video for being disgusting. It makes sense if most of the comments on the video were negative, as evidenced by the like to dislike ratio. People have also criticized the video outside of the YouTube platform. Reddit user Perfect Muscle 5641 also wrote about this, stating quote, "Nah, you're really defending a person who's openly posting pedo shit. She deserves to be called out specifically considering her questionable content, especially to make a male student Ayano's pet, which is possibly not age restricted, and many young children could possibly be watching such videos. And that specific video literally condones domestic abuse or violence in SA. Yeah, a young high school girl having kinks of bringing home male students from her school and keeping them as pets, feeding them like an animal, keeping them chained up, forcing them to walk around in public in chains, and Ayano playing the BDSM queen is so normal to you, isn't it?" If anyone is wondering, this comment was a response to someone else's comment about Jang Jang. I do agree with what Perfect Muscle is saying though. The turning a male student into Ayano's pet video does feel like it's promoting abuse in a way. That may seem like the only problematic concept video Jang Jang has made, but it's not. Jang Jang has also uploaded a video titled "Hanako Yamada Gets Rejected by Senpai" on her channel. One could probably guess where this is going based on the title alone. The video shows Hanako telling her brother, Senpai, that she doesn't want him to get a girlfriend. However, he ends up rejecting this demand, telling Hanako that she needs to become more independent and let him make his own decisions. So, why would people have a problem with this video? The idea of Hanako acting like this to Senpai is very gross. As most of you might know, Hanako and Senpai are siblings. With that being said, it's practically promoting the concept of incest. It makes sense why people would have problems with Jang Jang uploading this type of video. Surprisingly, the like to dislike ratio of the video is pretty good. Of course, there are quite a few dislikes, but it's not enough to say that most viewers didn't like the video. The comments are a different story, however. Isn't that his sister? Bro, what the fuck? They're siblings? Jang Jang, babe. That's his sister. They're freaking siblings. Hanako is Taro's little sister. No way you actually spent time doing this without thinking it was weird. This confession sounds very suspicious, don't you think? Remember, it's his sister. Sweet Home, Alabama. Something I do find interesting is how the comments on this video haven't been disabled yet. Considering how weird the concept of the video is, you'd expect Jang Jang to have disabled the ability to comment on it. This is not the case, however. One positive about this is that it allows viewers to leave their criticisms about the concept video, all of which are justified. Of course, these are not all the concepts that Jang Jang has gotten backlash for, but going through them will make this video really long. A while ago, I made a video exposing who is perhaps the most problematic Yandere Simulator YouTuber. Since then, another individual within the community has also been exposed. However, it's not a YouTuber, but rather a Roblox developer. They are the creator of a very popular Yandere Simulator remake on the Roblox platform. We'll be discussing everything in this video. So, who is this problematic Roblox developer that we keep talking about? They are one who goes by the name WildWolf. She is a Roblox developer who created the Yandere Simulator fan game Love Letter. This game should not be confused with another one that went by the same name, which suffered from its own drama back in September 2020. Anyway, WildWolf is the person behind the Yandere Simulator fan game Love Letter. It currently has over 23 million visits as of May 2025. Basically, the game is pretty popular. With all of this said, you're probably wondering what WildWolf has done to be considered very problematic. Believe it or not, there's quite a lot. For one, they are known to be pretty open about their fetish. It sounds crazy, but let me explain. WildWolf is someone who's been known to have a bara kink. For those who don't know, bara is basically yaoi but more explicit, if you get what I mean. In other words, bara is a subgenre of fiction that focuses on male-on-male relationships, usually gay or bisexual ones. I'm honestly not surprised that there's an audience for this type of stuff. If yaoi can exist, so can a genre like bara. With all of that said, why are we bringing this up? WildWolf has been known to have a bara fetish. She has made this public by creating a game known as Bara Furry Sauna Hangout 16+. One thing I do need to say is that as of this video being recorded, the game is being moved. It currently exists under the name Furry Campsite Hangout by a group of the same name. Believe it or not, this group is owned by none other than WildWolf. Anyway, why is this a problem? It's not so much the kink itself, but how WildWolf is expressing it. She's a developer on the Roblox platform, whose target audience is people under 18. Of course, it's also appealing to people 18 and older, but Roblox is mainly for underaged people. Anyway, creating a game like this is very weird, as little kids should not be exposed to something like bara. Something like that will be more fitting for people who are adults, such as myself. Going back to the Sauna Hangout game, the thumbnail alone gives an idea of what can be expected. It shows a very buff male furry sitting in a sauna with only shorts on. Even though the game originally had the words 16+ in the title, that's not going to stop little kids from potentially stumbling onto the game and seeing some very weird stuff. I did take a few screenshots of the game itself, which mainly showed people hanging out with each other while dressed up as furries. So, why is WildWolf having a bara fetish bad? It's because she is being open about it on the Roblox platform, whose target audience is little kids. They should not be exposed to this type of content, as it could potentially traumatize them. In addition to this, bara games will be more appealing to those who are over the age of 18. I personally have no issue with WildWolf being into that stuff, but it's weird for them to be making games like this on Roblox, which is mainly targeted towards little children. WildWolf has also been exposed for being a very toxic person in general. There's quite a lot to this claim, so we'll be discussing the most important parts. WildWolf has been known to tell people to hurt themselves. One example of this is WildWolf telling a minor to end their own lives in a pretty hateful tone. What's insane is that based on the screenshot, there doesn't seem to have been any reason for WildWolf to say this. Nothing can be seen that prompted her to say this. Something else I find weird is how WildWolf basically called the minor in question fat. It's just straight up wrong, but considering the context of this screenshot, it's not that surprising WildWolf would say that. In addition to this, there is also evidence of WildWolf being a pretty racist person. For example, someone was able to record footage of WildWolf saying the N-word in a Roblox game.
Heck? What the heck?
Actually, clock his ass.
Yeah, clock
Stupid
him.
Nick.
Obviously, this is a very bad thing to do. It becomes even worse, however, when it was revealed that WildWolf is not even black. There are also screenshots that show what WildWolf looks like, and it's safe to say that she is not black. We won't be showing her face due to privacy reasons, but one can find pictures of them if they look hard enough. Speaking of this, remember how I said there is footage of Wild Wolf saying the N-word in a Roblox game? While this happened, the avatar that she wore was of a stereotypically black person. Here's an image of the Roblox avatar featured in the video. It's very obvious how this Roblox avatar is problematic. It's literally a stereotypical version of a black person. One other thing that is somewhat important to note is that the footage of Wild Wolf being racist took place in a game known as The Hood. Do what you want with that information. In summary, Wild Wolf has also been exposed for being a very toxic person. This comes in the form of them getting caught telling minors to off themselves, as well as for being a pretty racist person. The latter can be seen both through what they have said and how they've dressed up on Roblox. Believe it or not, Wild Wolf is also known to be a straight up bad developer. We know this because one of the former developers of Love Letter has spoken out about how Wild Wolf has treated them and other volunteers. We'll be sharing what they have said about Wild Wolf. For one, Wild Wolf has been known to steal assets from competitor Yandere Simulator fan games. Well, she would ask her developers and scripters to try and steal assets when necessary. Going back to the former scripter of Love Letter, they showed a screenshot that showed Wild Wolf stating that it was, quote, time to steal lethal assets. In addition, the scripter also has screenshots of them asking why Love Letter still had a stolen asset from another game. If I'm correct, stealing assets from other games is a sin in game development. I said it's because the whole point of game development is to create everything yourself. At least, everything that is included in a game should be made by whoever worked on the game. As can be seen here, Wild Wolf decided to take the lazy route and told one of her scripters to steal assets from other games. That's a big no-no when it comes to creating video games. This next point isn't exactly related to developing the game itself, but more towards how Wild Wolf treats rival games. Wild Wolf has also been exposed for being salty towards rival Yandere Simulator fan games. One of these games is known as Lovesick. It's another Roblox game that basically has the same concept as Love Letter. Both of them are Yandere Simulator roleplay games, but have different executions. Anyway, Wild Wolf has also banned people for playing Lovesick. As can be seen by the screenshot here, Wild Wolf stated that they banned a person named Jug for being annoying. In reality, however, Jug had played Lovesick at some point before this, which was the actual reason why Wild Wolf banned them. This also connects back to the section of Wild Wolf being toxic, as any competent Roblox developer would not shit-talk competitor games and fellow developers. Speaking of her being an incompetent developer, Wild Wolf has also been known to not credit those who helped out with Love Letter. Going back to that same scripter we talked about, they also stated that Wild Wolf would not credit those who worked on Love Letter. As can be seen in these screenshots, the scripter asked Wild Wolf if they could credit someone who fixed one of the models. Wild Wolf responded in a hostile way, rejecting the question and calling the person myop. Staying on topic, the same volunteer also stated that his critic got removed after leaving the team. For context, the scripter was responsible for scripting 95% of Love Letter. Essentially, they made the entire game. However, when the scripter had left the Love Letter team, Wild Wolf removed his credit from the game's description. Instead of saying scripted by Bobby, the description simply said created by Wild Wolf. It's crazy because doing this shows what kind of mentality Wild Wolf has when it comes to creating games. They essentially think that if a volunteer doesn't work with them anymore, they can claim credit for everything that the volunteer has made. If everything we've talked about sounds pretty bad, it gets even worse from here. There has been a notable case where Wild Wolf created false allegations towards someone who spoke out against her. This case involves a small Yandere Simulator YouTuber named ChipsRTB. They have nearly 3,000 subscribers, so they're becoming somewhat popular. Anyway, what even happened? In March 2025, Chips spoke out about Wild Wolf and what she had done to him. They made a lot of the same allegations that we shared in this video. Everything was going well for a while. However, soon after, Wild Wolf stated that she was going to humble Chips. Needless to say, fake allegations were soon made against Chips, stating that he was a very weird person. Chips was also accused of sending, quote, lots of furry porn with cubs to people associated with Wild Wolf. It ended with the individual stating that they think Chips should not be around kids, as they believed, quote, he's going to do something bad and hurt someone. The same person who posted this message on Snapchat also took to Reddit and shared these allegations, attaching evidence of Chips being a weird person. Needless to say, all of these allegations made against ChipsRTB were false. How do we know this? For one, the posts made regarding Chips were made soon after Chips spoke out against Wild Wolf. Chips' statement was made on March 8th, while Wild Wolf stated that she would humble him on March 9th. In addition, the Reddit post about the entire thing was created on March 26th, the same month that Chips spoke out about everything. However, Chips is not the only one who was threatened by false allegations. Remember how I mentioned a former scripter was also associated with WildWolf? He also provided a screenshot that shows WildWolf threatening to bring him down with her if she got cancelled. Basically, if WildWolf ever got cancelled, she would try and bring the scripter down with her. It's all just very disgusting. Creating false allegations against someone who spoke out about you is a very low thing to do. It also shows how much they care about having a good reputation. Of course, it's not surprising that someone like WildWolf would do this. Based on everything else we've discussed, this type of behavior is perfectly in character for her.